Greetings everyone, my name is Buck Business. Konnichiwa, I'm Kawaii Critic, and today we are here to review My Little Pony Season 9, Episode 5, The Point of No Return. So, this episode begins with Derpy-san delivering a big old box to Twilight-san, and upon opening it, she discovers that upon a bunch of memorabilia, among those were a book that she had not returned because apparently in season 1, I would have to rewatch this, but apparently she knocked over a book and it was hidden underneath the shelf for all this time, though that would make no sense since the library blew up. So this episode is impossible, but whatever. I guess magic made the book come back, question mark? Yeah, I'm pretty sure whoever wrote this is stupid. And didn't remember what happens later on in the seasons where, her library gets blown up to smithereens, but whatever. So, with an already stupid concept that makes absolutely no canonical sense, since they want to make flashbacks to said episode, we thought we would blow this episode up and say that it makes no sense, and it doesn't. So, nonetheless, Twilight and Spike, as a consequence of trying to help out, ends up following her along as she's trying to not return the book, but he keeps suggesting to just do it, and along the way, she's trying to hide her identity, hide the fact that she's a princess, and hide the fact that she has had this perfect record. So, Spiky-kun returns the book, and they really hammer in, like, oh, this is gonna cause shame or whatever, and you need to go to this, like, lower echelon floor to return it or whatever. Even though they end up, like, just returning it normally at the end anyway, so this episode makes even less sense than the concept already not making any sense to begin with, but whatever. So, yes. They do that. They find out that that the librarian that she was initially looking for is not there, and this causes a panic as they kind of run into, as they're sort of mulling about, they run into an old character that we've seen before, Moon Dancer, because we can have certain callbacks that sort of make sense, I guess, but others that don't, so okay. So she talks to this elder pony who says and misremembers or either that or completely lies to Twilight-san about how this librarian pony got fired. So this causes Twilight-san to freak out over her feeling responsible and blah blah blah. So she goes on a mission to find out where this old librarian pony went. They end up in this elderly home, and from there, it kind of meanders about as she goes from location to location trying to figure out where this pony is. And yeah, it just eats up more time. So they finally do find her, and once they try to explain it the first time, it fails miserably as she wants nothing to do with the library anymore. So they proceed to find her again and try to re-explain the situation, and Twilight feels that guilt, and this elder pony says that she wanted to leave, and it took that one mistake on Twilight's part for her to realize that she didn't want to be this librarian that had this perfect record, quote unquote. And she recovers the book, that being Twilight, and it gets a little messy due to them being gotten out of a food fight, as best as I can explain it. And the analogy or metaphor or whatever you want to call it doesn't really make sense. She says that the miss on the book is what makes it perfect, quote unquote. That's what Twilight says, and after like swiping off some of it, it's the book is called something along the lines of perfection and the impossible something. I forget what the last word was, but nonetheless, the point being, this ideal to strive for perfection. And I do think that analogy is a bit off, as I do think being cleansly and being a perfectionist are two very different things. In fact, you can apply being a perfectionist to being cleansly. Just as an example, if you were to be told to clean your room, as an example, or to clean your room to perfection, that means two very different things. If you were to just be told to clean your room, you would probably do a once over, and that'd be that, and you'd be done. But if you were to be told to do it to perfection, you would probably spend several hours doing each task and making sure that everything is actually spotless. So again, I think there is a disconnect with that connection that they try to make in this episode. But of course, this is a moral for Twilight to not be a perfectionist, and that's that. But besides this episode actually being impossible, they did an episode based off of it anyway, so here we are. And here's the thing about perfection, and I'm just gonna be honest here, as I always have been. This episode is not good, obviously. It kind of came about in a way that doesn't make any sense. But putting that aside, let's say for the sake of argument that this episode can exist, in striving for perfection and leaving the moral as is. Here's the cut of the jib, and this is my take on perfection, is that yes, this episode does have an accurate moral, sure. However, there are two crucial things I think that are kind of left out of this episode, but probably could be explored in different episodes, or, if they were to tack on more than one moral, which is something the show has done before, sometimes to no success and sometimes to varying degrees of success, so sort of hit and miss, if you will. But here's the thing about being a perfectionist, is that there's nothing wrong to strive for to perfection, but to believe you are a perfectionist and to constantly do it is that line that I don't think that they hit hard enough in this episode, on top of the fact that here's what it is that the whole striving for perfection thing is that I think it is actually very important to have at least that one thing that you can at least say you're successful at. Not be a perfectionist at, but be successful at. I think, again, there's a very distinct difference between those two things. If you are someone who is constantly failing, then yes, like this very channel is a perfect example of encapsulation of what I'm trying to get at. Both of my channels have been utter failures. So for us to strive for perfection is something we should be doing. But for someone like Twilight, who has been in a state of being a perfectionist her entire life, then her getting knocked down a peg makes a little bit more sense for her. But that doesn't connect to anyone else unless they find themselves to be perfectionist. Which is a hard thing to even be, because the first step is to be successful. You have to be successful in order to get to that next step of perfectionist. You know, you have to have that thing that is solid, but then you tell yourself later, I can do it better. That is where the perfection attitude actually comes from. It's not doing something bad or really, really bad and then saying, again, they're varying different states. So I think what would have helped this episode out, if their moral really was being a perfectionist, is to have a pony foil to Twilight Sparkle in this episode. And it could have been a new pony or something, it doesn't really matter. Or a character that is on the complete opposite spectrum, so it probably shouldn't have been one of the main six, but someone who struggles with actually succeeding in general, who has faced failure after failure after failure to create that foil for Twilight, who is that next step above, who is that perfectionist. Again, this episode doesn't make any sense as it is because of the whole Tarek blowing up her library, so I think having a different concept would have made a lot more sense for this episode to even fit if they are speaking in a canon manner. But as this episode is, it doesn't make any sense. The ramifications of Twilight feeling bad also are very misplaced. This sort of misinformation that she gets, if the only thing that can be gleaned is a okay-ish moral that sort of just kind of peaks to being okay-ish and is actually, it could also be gleaned as bad at the same time. This episode is awful. What is with season 9? Why are we 5 episodes in and we're still having no good episodes yet? This season has been really, really bad. And I can't believe I'm one of the few people who are actually seeing this and noticing all of these issues. But that being said, that is our review of this episode. So if you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like and comment and subscribe to our main channel. And until next time, everyone, farewell. Bye-bye!